Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everyone, welcome to Night Vision, a very special edition of Night Vision. Tonight's show, we are coming to you once again from beautiful southern France. And we have been out on the road this week exploring some new finds that have been made by James and that were just absolutely mind-blowing. We visited a Templar town that was built entirely by the Knights Templar. And as far as we can find so far, this is the only place of its kind in existence anywhere. So I am just so thrilled to have been able to see it with my own eyes and appreciated it very much. And there was a whole collection of Templar sites in a very, very small area of the Languedoc-Roussillon in France, where we are located. It's a pretty broad area, though, so we had to do some driving. But without further ado, I'm going to bring my partner, my historian, James Martin on. Welcome to Night Vision, Jay.
With a K.
With a K tonight, absolutely. So I'm going to rely heavily on you, as I always do, to give us some of the detail and background to these amazing places. I'd kind of like to know, because I don't think I've asked you this, how was it that you came across this Templar town, the Templar town of, okay, I'm going to try it, Couvertoirade. It's a hard one. Anyway, how did you happen to find out about that? Because I've never heard anything about it.
Well, I was looking at one place that we visited, which was Saint-Guillaume-le-Dessert.
Oh, yes.
And was looking at one of mine and many others' ancestors, someone called William of Gellon, and really just doing some background history of the general area. I ended up coming across they call it the Larzac Plain. Generally, not always, but generally, when you have a town or a village that ends with "ac," it's often Roman. And Larzac being a plain, I thought was this Roman area. Then, just generally reading about the Romans in the area and then the Templars in the area, I came across this very bizarrely named Couvertoirade, meaning sort of covert, meaning sort of stronghold. And the word roof as well. It got me intrigued. What is this? And it really just means sort of etched now, like Couvertoirade, meaning sort of fortified place, and it very much is that, as we saw. And so, just a general background. I mean, it's always useful if you're visiting anywhere to do a bit of a background on, what the general history of the place is. And yeah, I think I was taken back by our visit. I've never seen quite so many Templar sites in such a concentrated area, and in a really, really good state of repair. Some people might say over repair, but still, they, these places are, still standing. Really, really interesting.
Yes, it's unusual to see so many structures and walls and buildings and things that are still standing. We see a lot of remnants. We see a lot of ruins. And this place is not a ruin. Although, as you say, I'm sure they've done some upkeep and some repairs. They have tried to keep everything. Oh, there it is. Amazing. And yeah, it was a breathtaking visit, and something that, I'm so glad I lived long enough to see, because I didn't even know that it existed. And so that is very amazing. I sent a few pictures round to just a couple of friends, fellow researchers, and where is this place? What's the name of it? What's going on? So I had to send info back to everybody, because I think this is news to a lot of people.
Yeah, I remember the first time I went, it was midway through the COVID pandemic. Travel restrictions had just lowered slightly. I'm wandering around thinking, wow, this is a really impressive. I mean, when we generally look for clues of the Knights Templar, I mean, one of the reasons people get very excited about the Templars is they are quite enigmatic. There are clues that are left in stone and in writing from them, but it is, in terms of history, the Templar period is a sort of blip. It's not really that long that they were around. So to find something that's still wholly intact that was built by them is truly remarkable. And for those watching the show, this is an image in a museum of essentially, what it looked like, a sort of model. And I have to say, that is what it looks like.
It is what it looks like. I was going to say, that's exactly what it looks like today. So rare, so rare. And do you have any information on any of the individuals that were there or involved in the founding of that town, and what exactly was going on at that moment?
Yeah,
as you say, it's a relatively narrow period of time, regardless. But
so I mean, this place is first mentioned as a farmhouse, actually. I've just mentioned a place called Saint Guillaume le Dessert. Well, there's an abbey at that place. That place was established by William, the first Prince of Orange, allegedly, but the second Duke of Toulouse, William of Jalon. And in the Abbey of Jalon, as it was, Gurtrad appears in the late 11th century in one of the charters there. The Templars take control of the farmhouse, if you will. It really is a small building akin to a farmhouse in 1158. And the person who donated the land was called Raymond Berenger, who was the Count of Barcelona and the King of Aragon. And so the preceptory itself, so the bricks and mortar, doesn't really begin construction until the 1180s. It's finished in 1181. And what you see today in terms of the stone and mortar comes from this period. So if anyone's wanting to do some research into the background of some of the key characters, Raymond Berenger, interesting character anyway, King of Aragon, Count of Barcelona, had a lot of lands across the Languedoc. And some of the names associated really are Richard de Montpaillon and Branguier de Molnar. I will, if you want any more details on them, please just drop me an email or drop us an email, I should say, at info@newrennies.org.
Great. Now, you mentioned that, he was the Aragonese king at the time, and it seems like there was a lot of relationship going on between the royalty of Aragon and the Knights Templar, because, of course, as we know, he's not the only one who donated lots of property, and other things to the Knights Templar. So why do you think that relationship existed between Aragon and the Knights Templar?
Absolutely out of necessity. So it's worth pointing out with Aragon, which is on the other side of the Pyrenees. So we're quite far away from the Kingdom of Aragon in Le Couvretoir. We're, somewhere in the region of 200 to 250 kilometers, roughly about 180 miles, something like that. It's quite a distance away. But you've got a king called Alphonse the Battler, and of course he donates or tries to donate in his will the entire kingdom of Aragon to the Knights Templar, the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre, and the Hospitaller. None of that happens, of course. But I think if you're looking at the Templars in the Middle East, what you've got is a fighting force, essentially. Protecting pilgrims is the official notion behind them. That a lot of these farmhouses are supporting them in their journey to the Middle East. We tend to forget that whilst there's crusade going on in the Middle East, this is a crusade not just for recapturing Jerusalem, but kicking out the so-called infidels. And these infidels have the name of the followers of Islam today, or back then they were referred to as the Moors, or Saracens, as the French were referring to them. And the Moors were and occupied most of the Iberian Peninsula, most of what we call today Spain, but bordering a very small kingdom of Aragon, which later expands. You've got the counties and kingdom of Navarre or Pamplona and Castile, and all of these very small counties eventually become kingdoms, that kind of idea. Over time, they're trying to get rid of the Saracens. They're trying to get rid of the Moors from the Iberian Peninsula. So it's true to say that the Templars established Portugal, or Portugal, some interesting images there from one of the later kings of Portugal, but they really did. Were key to founding Portugal, and we're quite key in, but it depends on your perspective, liberating or, conquering would probably be more accurate, Moorish Spain. The kings of Aragon, counts of Barcelona, depended on that fighting force. Even, I know we're skipping well to the end of the Templars, but even when the Templars were disbanded in France, there were just name changes in Portugal and Spain, the Order of Christ, that kind of stuff, because they're still needing that fighting force, that elite fighting force, to assist with what they call the Reconquista of the Iberian Peninsula.
And obviously, they were trained fighters and fierce fighters, but what about their numbers? Something like, royalty donating their property and all that would indicate to me that it must have been a pretty mighty fighting force, and I think because of all the stories of the 9, Templar Knights going, protecting pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem, I think it's ingrained, at least it is for me, that the Templars were sort of a small insular group, but was it a quite large army?
When we think of knights, we think of people with swords and, clean clothes and helmets and all of this. Just bear in mind that a sword is, in terms of today's money, something like the cost of a tank. This is extremely delicate or delicately made. You know, it takes a lot of skill and all of this. And we think of it's just knights that are going into battle or protecting pilgrims. We forget about John the Muck Shoveler, who's working for the Templars, either farming, or is the page boy, or is the men at arms, or there's a whole auxiliary team behind one knight. You're looking about 10, roughly, 10 people per knight. So, and it makes me chuckle. Oh, the the 9 founders of the Templar. Or is it 11? Or is it 10? Or is it 7?
Or is it 7?
But I don't think these elderly people, at the time at least, would have been digging too far down. I think, their retinue would have been doing a lot of that. Mm. So in terms of numbers, yeah, I suppose in terms of the elite fighting force, we're not looking at hundreds of thousands, but we are looking at thousands, something like this. But let's not also forget the wider, the men at arms, the people who look after the horses and support and all of this too. But the operation of the Templars, you've sort of got a few phases with them, I suppose. And I've been thinking about this for my next book, which I've started writing. You've sort of got a phase of, let's call it donation. Then you've got the second phase of the Templars, which is operation. And then you've got downfall. So in the period of donation, for a lot of kings and counts and dukes who are donating lots of land to them, they're doing so really for a few reasons. One, out of piety. Look, we've helped this religious order. Aren't we God, really good people? You've got a practical reason. There's no point just sending money. I mean, we've seen this perhaps even with current Ukraine. You can send money over, fine. But if there aren't the products to spend the money on when you get to your destination, what's the point? And so this is why a majority of the European Templar operation is farmland. Where you find good quality farmland, you're almost guaranteed to find some Templar legacy in parts of Europe. Where we've been in the Larzac, for example, prime farming land on the plain, and up above you have quite difficult terrain, but was used for goats and cheese making, and the production of honey, things like this.
A lot of sheep were around there.
Yeah. Well, without getting into Agnes Day, the sheep are very well documented. Alan Butler wrote a book about, the importance of sheep to the Templars. It's such a strange topic. Oddly not interesting. I don't need to read anything else about sheep, I have to say that. But really important. I mean, sheep are not these big creatures that we have today. They're slightly bigger than a cat. They produce wool, really, and it's not until the introduction maybe of the herdwick or some of the sheep from Iran, really, and the Middle East, that you get a bit more of the bulkier breeds. But either way, those foodstuffs are being packed and shipped over to the Middle East, or to assist when people are moving to ports to sail, etc., etc. So that's really the big operation. It's not just about money. Mostly it's about food and clothing and production to support over in the Middle East during the Crusades.
Wow. So yeah, I would think that they would have quite a mighty reputation, and that would sort of trigger all these people to want to sort of ingratiate themselves in some way to them in case they needed to call on them, for a favor, for protection, and that sort of thing. And I also wonder, asking about the numbers, I wonder if also just, was their reputation like a deterrent as well? Did people at that time, of course, everyone is in love with the Knights Templar today. It's a romantic part of history, and, a lot of things have been said about them, some true, some not. But at the time, what did people generally think about the Templars?
I don't think
bag?
people would look at them quite as romantically as perhaps we do today. The Hospitaller famously didn't get along with the Templars, and they acted like spoilt children, to be fair, destroying each other's water sources, spoiling foods, dressing up as each other to cause mischief. I think that was a jealousy of essentially two brotherly organizations and brothers squabbling and all of this. For a lot of medieval academics, I suppose, you've got pretty scathing remarks about them, to be fair. They're seen as arrogant and elitist in the eyes of some. They are noted for essentially having a free pass, having papal authority for quite a while. So, is it that they're genuinely seen as somehow, a horrible organization? No, a lot of it's jealousy. I would suggest they are seen as an elite, though. They are seen as, being the Pope's army, basically. They don't report to any king or duke or anything like that. They report upwards, really, to the top directly. They do have to follow laws and what have you, but there's plenty of evidence of disputes on lands that have been donated, or disputes to do with proximity and who owns what. Generally, though, one of the difficult things that we have in history is we're looking for the average person. The average person isn't writing too much. So what can we say about that? Well, my suggestion is that they were certainly seen as part and parcel of everyday life. You can gather that, at least, because when they are disbanded, there is absolute shock. The Templars are part and parcel of day-to-day life. One day, the following day,
they're gone.
So there is a lot of shock and all of this, and I think in that shock, it's there's not much by way of celebration. So I think for the general population, there's an acceptance that they are doing some good. Probably a bit of suspicion too of some of the proposed rituals and all of this.
And I want to get ahead of the story, but maybe at some point you can explain how it all ended up turning on the Knights Templar, and how although they were the Pope's army, the church didn't do much to protect them, and in fact they became known as heretics with talking heads and devils and devil worshiping and all kinds of weird things going on. How the tide turned, I guess, under pressure from the King of France. I don't know, so maybe you could go into that a little bit. But if you want to tell that now, that's great.
Yeah, we might as well
go for it then.
The downfall of the Templars. So they're reporting up to a Grand Master, then to the Pope, and all of this. The one thing I suppose they hadn't banked on is what happens if the Pope's kidnapped. And what if the Pope actually ends up being under the control of one of these kings that you don't report to? And that's what happened. The Pope was kidnapped by someone called Guillaume d'Inauguray. He basically says, "You're coming with us or your family are going to get killed." Popes then taken to Avignon, where that Pope stays, and then when he dies, the next Pope's brought as well. So in essence, what you've got is a Pope that's a captive in France, and if the king doesn't agree with what the Pope says, you know what the threat is to the Pope. We'll replace you.
Or onto the fire.
So I think you've got a lot of this, and I think initially when the Avignon popes are knocking around, so this is in south eastern France, when they are knocking around, initially it's control. There's quite a bit of shock for a number of the other Catholic countries. But it's not until a little bit later on, really, that there's, the Pope actually is in control of an army. We better do something about that. And my suspicion is, I think what they were looking at doing, certainly, I think 1304, there were some discussions around trying to merge the hospital and the Templars. So the hospital aren't really a fighting order. They're there to look after people, essentially. They do have knights. They do militarize eventually. But the notion was to try and merge these two orders together. That obviously didn't happen. I do wonder whether the idea behind that was to destroy both of them, or, sort of refound a new order, something like this. Either way, what happened was the Pope's army was destroyed, or we talk quite a lot. So for those of you listening who will have told friends and others about the origins of Friday the 13th, just think about it like this. It's quite a sloppy job, wasn't it? It certainly wasn't the King of France, who was Philip IV or Philip le Bel. It wasn't really his finest moment, because he didn't manage to capture most of them, did he? We're talking about a third, and even of those, a third of the knights, even of those, some volunteered, many, but some volunteered into arrest. Well, as the eternal question goes, where did all the Templars' money go? Where did all their possessions and goods and, et cetera, et cetera? So it turned out to be a huge disaster for the French monarchy, ultimately, because one thing that the Templars were doing, but it wasn't on their job description, was actually stopping the factional, different wings of the royal French family from infighting. And when the Templars are removed, it's not too long before another order comes up.
Well, how did they manage to stop those factions from fighting in the first place?
They renamed the Knights Templar, same orders, same Cistercian-based orders, but they had the Garde Écossaise, or the Scots Guard. So the idea there was to stop this fighting. There would be an independent royal protection group, basically, armed knights drawn from Scotland, who was allied with France, but independent, not part of France. And that worked well up until Mary, Queen of Scots, who was part French, grew up in France. Suddenly, the Scots Guard for the Queen of Scotland suddenly corrupted, and that comes to an end. So,
and the Scots Guards that we see at the Vatican today are related to those former.
They're the Swiss Guard.
Oh, Swiss Guard.
They're the Swiss Guard, but the
now,
Swiss
why
Guard.
do they have the Swiss Guard?
Same reason. An independent, not aligned to the Papal States at the time. In allies or anything like that. So you've got an independent fighting force, and again, to independently defend the Pope. Same principle.
And of course, now it's just sort of ceremonial, or because they don't really.
Well, in Portugal, for example, where there's some humorous letters going between the Pope and the King of Portugal. The King of Portugal says, "You're not disbanding the Templars here." And the Pope says, "Oh, yes, I am." "Oh, no, you're not." This kind of stuff. And they agreed to just a name change. They become the Order of Christ. That still exists today, but it is totally ceremonial. It's more of a sort of order of merit in the Republic of Portugal.
Well, goodness, should we take a look? We've got some wonderful images from our last few days of travel, and we wanted to share them with you. So I hope many of you are actually watching the show online on YouTube or on the KGRA website rather than just listening, because there are some stunning images that we're going to share with you. So I'm going to let you pick the order. Oh, I love that one.
Well, this one was from a place called St. Eulalie. And Eulalie, we've just mentioned La Couvertoire, which is a Templar town. What we should just note is that when the Templars were disbanded, one of the orders, I think from 1312 off the top of my head, was that Templar property should be given to the hospital, the Knights Hospitaller. So one of the reasons I think that these sites are in a good state of preservation is the hospital owned them, lived in them, ran them up until the French Revolution. So either way, St. Eulalie was the parent preceptory. You have the Couvertoire, which is called a daughter preceptory, but the people who run and coordinate that preceptory and others was at St. Eulalie. And here is here's just one image. You know, you've got well, it's more of a hospital cross, but either way, you know, perhaps a Maltese cross there. And in that place, you can go in, explore the preceptory as you can at La Couvertoire. And it's there that I've never watched a film about the Templars inside a Templar commandery before. It was a really bizarre experience. Going up to one of the rooms, seeing scratch marks in the wall, clearly counting down the number of days or something like this. So I don't know what the story is behind that, but I would love to do a little bit more research. I mean, we've had a day really, but I would like to know, was someone put in solitary confinement in there? You know, what was all of that about?
And who and why? Yeah, absolutely.
And why weren't they put into some stocks, for example?
I will say this, you know, I voluntarily entered the stocks, but I was not allowed out for a little bit longer than I was comfortable. Look at that. I'm hideous.
I just can't believe you managed to wriggle free.
I know. It took me a while. I was definitely, and then you know, you guys didn't have to leave in the car without me, though.
Well, you've got very good homing senses.
Yep, I'm secretly a bat with my sonar. Ooh, yes.
So this is again at St. Eulalie, and there's a depiction clearly from the time of the Hospitaller. I mean, the cross looks like the flag of Savoy. To me, it might very well be a family, but you can see.
Are you talking about the cross in red or the dangling?
In red, yes.
Okay, yeah.
And just beneath the red cross, red and white cross, what you've got is a very typically Hospitaller cross there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And in terms of some of the other places that we went to, you've got, or I should point out the Saint-Guillaume-le-Désert, which is where William of Gellon, for those who are interested in Rennes-le-Château and the mysteries and all of this. William of Gillon was one of the people who founded, or well, he did personally, but he said that he's one of the people who founded Rennes-le-Château in the Carolingian period. Very interesting character. He essentially his story is he ends up he's one of the lieutenants, I think cousin as well of the king and emperor Charlemagne, Charles the Great, and he's responsible for pushing out the Moors, or the Saracens, whatever term you wish to use, from France and back into what we would call Spain today. And he has he serves as a general for a number of years, and then says, right, I'm giving up. I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life as a hermit, and founds a monastery and a hermitage at a place that would then later be known after him, Saint Guillaume William Le Desert, middle of nowhere kind of thing. The one thing he hadn't banked on is that he had quite a large number of followers who sort of stalked him and ended up settling around the hermitage. Now, the hermitage is atop a hill. So if any of you are looking at going there, it's about, about an hour and a half away from Montpellier, something like that. But if you are wanting to walk up to the hermitage, can I recommend that you take some climbing equipment? It's quite a walk with spectacular views. And you can see the hermitage that he founded there. And that was one of the places that we went to firstly. But again, what you had, interestingly, is amongst the followers who came with William and established the town, a lot of monks who then established the abbey. And if you go into the abbey of William of Gillon, or Abbey of Gillon, just pay close attention to the stairs going down, because if you go down, it's very claustrophobic. You can see the original church there, and above it is the medieval church. So you've got a Carolingian church, and then above it you've got this medieval thing. Absolutely beautiful town, very tranquil, lots of history, and it's where William of Gillon, key to the founding of Rennes-le-Château in this area of the Raz or Razès. That's where he is. That's where he's interred.
Entombed there. That's really interesting. It is funny how you do find these connections back to Rennes-le-Château from lots of different places, and you would have never thought there, or not necessarily thought there would be a connection. But this one is a very solid one, so that's really interesting. And what was the time period then when he was alive? Because that must have been quite some time ago.
Well, he's around. His exact birth date isn't known. So, as I say, he's the grandson of Charles Martel, who's the mayor of Paris.
Oh, right.
And he's born roughly mid-750s, roughly. Even his death is subject to some speculation. We know it's the 28th of May, but is it 8/12 or is it 8/14? Exactly where he passed is also up for debate. Some say he died in his hermitage, at Gillon, if you will. Others say, is it, en route to somewhere like Le Dev, or so. His birth and death is a little bit of a mystery. But that's the time period that we're we're looking at.
Yeah.
And he's said also to be the first Prince of Orange, and it's not really too clear that there's any basis for that. Or if there is, he probably wouldn't be the first, but he's certainly associated with the House of Orange. Also, people have stated before, I was just wanting to see if I could find the source of this, which I've not been able to. But there's an idea that he becomes the king of Septimania. That particular title, I struggle with. To be fair, I think more accurately, it would be something maybe Duke or something like that. He was the Duke of Toulouse. But yeah, a very interesting character. There was Arthur Zuckerman was the person I was trying to think of. Claimed that William of Gillon was in fact of Jewish descent, and there is some folklore around that suggesting that he was from the House of David. He's said to have respected the Sabbath during battles, for example. It is said that he spoke Arabic and Hebrew fluently. So there's, he's said, William of Gillon is said to have been the sort of origin point for the House of David, in every royal family in Europe or within particular bloodlines. Not to put too much of a point on that for you, Renaud, but yeah, he was also, as I say, he was the Count of the Razès, which the capital is Redé, or today's perhaps Rennes-le-Château, which was founded on the hilltop, and then around it was sort of a two-part town. But yeah, really interesting character. I definitely recommend people read a little bit more about him, because, as I say, he then sort of gives up and says, "Okay, I'm going to dedicate my my life, to God, I suppose." And this is, if you go to that town, it is one of the principal and key points on one of the Camino routes to Santiago de Compostela. So you see in the town lots of clamshells and these representations depicting that pilgrimage. So go visit.
Pilgrims in those towns, as they're on their journey. It's really interesting.
Still to this day, yeah. So if
absolutely.
If you go into the church, just be respectful, because there may be people praying and doing all of this.
Right.
But
very quiet in those churches. But that is amazing. Beautiful. I'm still agog at all these places. The picture that we shared at the beginning, this one, it's in the top, above the door of that church. I just wanted to kind of show it from the other side. And is there anything else of interest in that doorway that you wanted to bring up? It's quite ornate in its design.
Well, this was at the town of St. Eulalie, and it is a very unusual design. Unfortunately, it's restored, as you can see. The door is definitely. And
do you think those spirals were added? I saw a lot of spirals in that town, and I'm wondering if that was part of its history, or if that's something. Or something that came later in their history. Do you have any any idea about that or what those signify?
I'm not too certain. Usually when there's a restoration project, they do try and keep to the original. So
Yes,
I think the
they do.
representations of them. The very first thing that came to my mind was it looked like some sort of labyrinth.
Yeah.
But I'm not too certain. I'm still doing some research on that place, because I should explain to everyone, up until 2 days ago, that particular place, well, I had no idea that it even existed. So it was surprising to have seen the Kuvatarod, this Templar town. Really nothing's changed. I think, Renee, you'd said, it's someone should film here. Do a film,
A movie.
a medieval movie. You wouldn't need to change anything.
Exactly. Oh, I would love to live there and pretend that I was back in that time, except, of course, I wouldn't really want to suffer the consequences that most of those people had to deal with during that time period, and the discomfort. But it would certainly be wonderful to be in that history, in the middle of it. That's, again, I've said it so many times about, what makes me grateful for the ability to be able to do a little traveling. In America, we are very far away from a lot of things. We're pretty isolated there. And many people don't travel outside the United States. And, it's expensive. I didn't travel outside the United States, until I was well into my adulthood. But it makes a difference how you think about history, and you start feeling it. You start associating with it, identifying with it. And it was interesting last night. We were looking at the videos that you shared of the young man who had taken historical figures and brought them to life through CGI, and seeing those faces instead of etched in stone or on a painting sort of come to life. It sounds silly and very elementary, but it makes you say to yourself somewhere, oh yeah, they were a person, not just a historical figure or a statue or a painting. That guy was walking around. He was going to the bathroom. He was, eating dinner, whatever. It was a person. And if you can connect more with the people in the past, I think it really brings history to life for you. And going to these places is another way of doing that.
I always, when I visit somewhere, I always like to touch the wall. So if you think I'm strange, if any of you ever see me doing that, I am strange, but I just like to get a feel for the place.
Yeah.
And I think it's when you visit a place. So I mean, for example, just one thing I wanted to just add. It's the one thing I when you visit somewhere, I mean, when you're reading about somewhere, you're limited with what you're being told. I know that sounds obvious, but when you visit somewhere and see it yourself, you begin to spot other things. For example, we were just talking about William of Gillon. Mm-hmm. In the church, you'll have to forgive me, everyone. I will get pictures ready for the next time that I'm on. But I'm sure you can appreciate the really special edition of KnightVision. We've just managed to get just at least some pictures. But there's an altar stone up at in the Abbey of Gillon. And that altar stone looks remarkably similar to the so-called Visigothic stone up at Rennes-le-Château. It is said that the church, whether there's any evidence or truth to this, but it has been alleged that the church at Rennes-le-Château was in fact founded personally by William of Gillon. Now, I agree. There are some absolute similarities between the Knight's Stone, as it's referred, and the Visigothic altar, as it's referred. That you wouldn't have been able to have made that connection if you hadn't been, if that makes sense. So when you visit somewhere, you go, oh, okay. And that can really inspire you then to do some more research and, form your own opinion. So absolutely. And for when you see statues and portraits and then, they come to life, it's very difficult for us as human beings to read about someone and think, what a horrible evil, such and such, or, oh, they did this or they did that. And then when you see them come to life, that dehumanizing thought that you had suddenly changes quite radically, because you see, these are people. These are people with, who do, have to go to the bathroom. They do have to eat. They have to drink. And, what are they thinking? What are they?
They fall in love and they get their hearts broken and they, all kinds of things. It's like you don't think of those things about, Julius Caesar, statue standing there. You don't really feel that that breath of life, that whatever it is, that spark. And we should have that guy on sometime. I'm sorry, I don't know if you have his name. I'm sorry, I didn't get it before the show, but we should invite him on sometime and talk about.
His name is Panagiotis Konstantinou.
Oh, so where is he located? I wonder.
If I had to guess, just based on a name, somewhere in Greece or Cyprus, maybe.
Yeah, sounds like it. So we'll reach out to him, and I would like to see how he thinks and how it feels during that process. And there has to be some choices that he makes during that process, and what informs what he does. I think that would be really interesting. So and you say he's been commissioned by what, museums and Stabby time. Yeah, I have different thoughts about you, Julius, now.
Well, I think, by museums and what have you. So, what this guy does is, again, he turns marble, images of people, busts, that kind of stuff, and artwork, and it doesn't reimagine them, but what he does is he turns them so they look like me and you.
He brings life into them, basically.
Brings life to them. And so when you see, when you see someone move, history is static. History has happened. It's not changing unless time travel gets invented, but it's static. And so we think of people in a very static way. They then did that. We don't think about, when they had a sneezing fit or, did they find things smelling badly, or, what were they thinking about the conditions they were in? When we say, for example, I was reading something just for the show, and they lived in squalor. Did they? Well, that's our view of them today. They probably didn't think of it like that. Right. When looking up medieval history, for example, the smell of excrement and all of this isn't associated with disease as it is for us today, or lack of hygiene. It's associated with prosperity. And you keep coming back to that point. And
I don't see how that is. I mean, is it because you had enough money to eat and then produce excrement? I don't know.
Well, you're not in a rural setting. You're going to a town. There's not many towns or cities in this period. Ian Mortimer is an historian, a very good one, by the way. I'd recommend reading any of his books. Ian Mortimer. He refers to it frequently. He says, well, again, you go back, they see it as prosperity. They see this as progress. We've got, there's what in England in the medieval period, you've really only got sort of 5 cities. You've got London, Newcastle, Bristol, Norwich, and then we're beginning to struggle a little bit. You know, and there's not many cities that have got above 10,000 people living in them, and perhaps 4.
Absolutely. You know, I don't know if you've got your eye on the clock, Mr. Martin, but it is time to wrap up. And we want to thank everybody for joining us. But we're going to leave you with some wonderful images from just a little bit of our travels this week. And I want to say good night and thank you to everyone. And thank you to James as ever.